Hi everybody, so this is your tutorial for the Module 6 assignment on the mend. First thing you're going to do is read all the instructions for the assignment and then download the sample images. I've already done that, so I'll go to my desktop where I've pulled up that folder and I'm going to walk you through the first of these images. So these are kind of in pairs. This is the editing image that doesn't look good, that needs to be fixed, and the final image that looks great. That's the final from the photographer that I found on Pexels.com. So I'll go to the editing image and I'll drag that into my Photoshop. If you don't know that little trick yet, it's kind of a fast and easy way to open an image in Photoshop. Drag it onto the icon, and now I've got it in here. So my background, I want to actually edit this image and drag the final image in. So I'm going to double click my background and get this layer, click this, and get this layer on top of a background editing photo. And then I'll add a new layer, drag that under. I want to have a background layer, so I'm going to fill that with white and use my crop tool to pull this out, to leave space, make room for the final image. For this layer 1, I'm going to make this into a background layer. Layer, new, background from layer. Now I've got a background, it's black. Whoops, that's because this background color down here is in black. I can swap that and image. New fill layer, solid color with white. And actually merge these two. I can shift. There's definitely an easier way of doing this. Merge layers. Okay. So I've got my editing image here, and I want to drag in my final image. To lay them side by side. So this is like a bit of a game. We're going to try and get this image to look like this image. We're going to use all of the tools that we learned in this module to try and get there as best we can, as close as we can. We're going to do this non-destructively, so that means we're going to use adjustment layers rather than editing the image directly itself. That's because we want to be able to kind of delete the image layer without having to go back and undo all the adjustments that we made, because eventually once you start undoing, you can't undo any longer. You can use the history setting, but non-destructive editing using the adjustment layers is the way to go. So we want to make sure that this final image is actually on top of this layer. So you can just click and drag that. And that's because when we use an adjustment layer, it adds an adjustment layer on top of the photo that you want to edit. And if the adjustment layer is on top of both of them, then it's going to edit both of the images. So think of it really like a real stack of layers here. So whatever's on top is going to affect everything below it. So we'll click on the editing photo layer and add an adjustment layer. And you can start wherever you'd like. I'm noticing that the image on the left is a lot darker than the image on the right. So I'm going to start with my brightness and contrast and just see where that gets us. So I'll toggle this to the right and increase the brightness. Already it's looking closer. But now I notice that this image is a lot more yellow than this image. There's some color color stuff going on there. So I'll need to adjust that as well. So I'll go to my adjustment layer and go down to, I could do hue and saturation. That's a little bit dramatic. I'm going to try color balance. So if it helps, you can pull up a color wheel. I just Googled color wheel and downloaded this onto my desktop. And you'll see this side is, the final image has a very blue and blue-gray background. The image on the left is a lot more yellow. And I know that because we're looking at a blue and this background looks green. So remember that when we add the primary colors blue and yellow together, we get a green. So we want to subtract any yellow from the image to get it to be more blue. So here we've got a yellow to blue spectrum, and we're going to slide this little slidey triangle closer to blue until we kind of visually see that it's getting closer to the original image. You can squint your eyes, sometimes that helps. Kind of see where things match up. It's close, it's getting a lot closer, and now I'm noticing that this needs to get brightened up a little bit in the probably highlights. So I think that's good for now for our color balance, and we'll play with some other adjustment layers and see where that gets us. So another tool for adjusting lighting is levels, not just brightness and contrast or exposure, but we could try levels. So levels is going to have all of the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. And it's going to show you kind of the dispersal of shadows, midtones, and highlights. So this is the highlight little slider, this is the midtone slider, and the shadow slider. And I'm noticing that some of the highlights are a bit darker than the final image. So I can try and pump up those highlights a bit to get them really bright. Now if I go too far, that's way too much. But just little by little, making those adjustments. I can play with the midtones, brighten up those midtones a bit, and then brighten or darken the shadows. Give a little bit of contrast. That's too much contrast. Okay, it's starting to look pretty good, but I am noticing it is a bit more green still. So I could go back to my color balance. I could try and get more blue, and I'm noticing that this is a little bit pinker on this side, this grapefruit, and this fabric here is a little bit more yellow. So I'm going to try and play with this magenta maybe. Getting a lot closer. I could also try my exposure. Let's go to an adjustment layer and play with the exposure. Brighten that up just a bit. It's getting pretty close. So play with that. Once you are happy with your images and it feels like you've got a good match, save it. So File, Save As. And if you want to keep editing or save this to your cloud or your Google Drive as a PSD file so that you can go back and edit it. You could also save that as a TIFF and it will save all your layers. You could do that. So I'll do for edit image flower still life for edit. Save it as a TIFF. I'll just save it into my sample images for download. Okay. It will notify me that including layers will increase file size. That's the price I'm going to pay for wanting to go back later and edit. So I could click OK. But in order to save this as a file to upload to Canvas, I want you to do this as a JPEG. Very important, because I don't want you to upload PSD files or TIFF files with lots of layers. It'll take a long time for you and will take a long time for me to download. So I'm going to go to Layer and Flatten Image to save this as a JPEG. So that will flatten all my layers. I'll lose all of that information, but I've already saved it somewhere else so that I could go back and edit. This is just for my submission. So I'll file Save As, and now it will give me a JPEG option. And I put in the assignment instructions, I would like you to name your files like this. 1, because this is the first sample image, and your name. The JPEG. Save. Sure, save as the maximum. And then you will see in your sample images, I will just upload that. So I want your edited image on the left and your final image on the right. Please reach out with any questions, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you do.